Ursula von der Leyen transitioned from the field of medicine to politics comparatively late in life, at the age of 43. She joined the CDU in 1990, in response to her father's defeat by Gerhard Schroeder in the Landtag election in Lower Saxony. After returning to Germany from the United States with her family, she worked in a voluntary capacity on issues which would later require her attention as a career politician. She served on multiple committees of the Lower Saxony CDU, including the Expert Committee on Social Policy, 1996 to 1997, and the Physicians' Working Committee, 1999. In the local government elections held in Lower Saxony in 2001, she was elected to the Town Council of Saint. She became chairwoman of the CDU group on the council and was appointed deputy mayor. From 2001 to 2004, she was a member of the Hanover Regional Assembly. Her star rose quickly, and she soon made the leap from local to state politics. Even before the Lower Saxony Landtag election in the spring of 2003, von der Leyen was seen as a potential minister. She was part of the team for the future assembled by Christian Wulff, who was then the regional CDU chairman and its candidate for the office of minister-president. At that time, the CDU had been in opposition for 13 years in Lower Saxony. The positions that von der Leyen advocated during the election campaign were ones of great personal significance to her: the compatibility of family and career, and better options for childcare. In the Landtag election on the 2nd of February, she stood as a candidate for the CDU in the constituency of Leerto and received 44.2% of the second votes, winning the district her father had once represented. At the land level, the CDU obtained 48.3% of the second votes, giving it an overwhelming victory. On the first day of the new legislative period, the 4th of March 2003, von der Leyen was sworn in as Minister for Social Affairs, Women and Health in Lower Saxony. The strict policy of austerity pursued by the state government under Christian Wulff left von der Leyen with limited room for maneuver in her new position as minister. The complete overhaul that the new minister-president had announced in his government policy statement did not spare the budget of the Ministry of Social Affairs. On the 1st of January 2005, non-means-tested disability benefits for the blind were abolished by the state government, prompting fierce protests among social welfare groups and those affected by the cutback. Von der Leyen justified this move by referring to the need for belt-tightening measures. By making specific, targeted cuts, she said, the government hoped to preserve the social safety net overall. Fiscal consolidation was also the rationale for the privatization of state-owned hospitals initiated by the ministry during her term. Von der Leyen left her own mark on family affairs policy with a program that she initiated in 2003 to encourage multi-generational rise in federal politics. Ursula von der Leyen belonged to a new generation of politicians who set out to recalibrate socio-political frameworks in response to the challenges arising from demographic change. As part of the CDU's effort to modernize its platform, she was involved in drafting a variety of reform proposals for social welfare programs in 2003 and 2004. In February 2004, she became deputy chairwoman of the Federal Expert Committee on Social Policy of the CDU in Germany. CDU and CSU were engaged in an internal argument about the possibility of making a fundamental change in the healthcare system. Von der Leyen was among those who advocated unlinking healthcare costs from wage costs. Alongside CDU chairwoman Angela Merkel, she promoted the idea of a uniform healthcare contribution combined with a taxpayer-funded, means-based subsidy for the needy. This was a proposal that the CDU had added to its platform at the party conference in Leipzig, 17th party conference of the CDU from 2 December 2003 in Leipzig, held under the motto "Germany can do more." As the media became increasingly interested in her as a minister and a mother of 7, she took the opportunity, in interviews and articles, to call attention to key problems in family and social policy, such as Germany's low birth rate and the difficulties encountered by women in reconciling family and career. Interviewed in Der Spiegel magazine in November 2004, she remarked that the CDU should make a greater effort to renew awareness of its expertise in social policy. She consistently put the family at the heart of her political work during this period. The social security systems are affordable only if there are children, and only then is there economic momentum. After the chairman of the Christian Democratic Employees Association, Hermann Joseph Arendts, had stood unsuccessfully for election to the CDU National Executive Committee on the 8th of December 2004, he proposed von der Leyen as a new candidate. She was subsequently elected to that body with a vote total of 94.1%, the best result of all the candidates, and was henceforth a member of the CDU party leadership. In the spring of 2005, von der Leyen was entrusted with the task of heading a newly created CDU Committee on Parents-Children Career. The committee was primarily concerned with the issue of making family and career more compatible and incorporating this issue into the CDU platform. After the early dissolution of the 15th Bundestag led to new parliamentary elections in September 2005, the CDU candidate for the chancellorship, Angela Merkel, appointed von der Leyen to her team of specialists as an expert on family affairs and healthcare policy. Federal Minister for Family Affairs, Senior Citizens, Women and Youth. Since the Bundestag election on the 18th of September 2005 did not result in a clear majority for either a Christian Liberal coalition, CDU/CSU and FDP, or a Red-Green coalition, SPD and Greens, the CDU/CSU and the SPD began exploratory negotiations. For the CDU, Ursula von der Leyen jointly led a working group whose purpose was to set out the objectives of the prospective new government in the field of family policy. On the 22nd of November 2005, the new cabinet under Angela Merkel was sworn in. It included von der Leyen as Minister for Family Affairs, Senior Citizens, Women, and Youth. She carried out the duties of her office as federal minister with great energy and focus. More children in families and more family in society was the motto that she chose to guide her work. Key projects of the Ministry of Family Affairs during this term included the introduction of a means-tested parental allowance on the 1st of January 2007, the Child Care Funding Act of the 16th of December 2008 for the expansion of child day care, and the multi-generational housing program, which drew on some of the work done by von der Leyen as Minister for Social Affairs in Lower Saxony. The policy direction of the new Minister for Family Affairs caused heated debate, not just among the general public, but also within the CDU and CSU. The Father's Months initiative was especially controversial. In addition to the normal 12 months in which families with young children could receive the parental allowance, these 2 months were offered subject to the condition that each parent should spend at least 2 months at home to care for the child. Critics within the CDU viewed this measure as unacceptable interference in private matters by the state. Von der Leyen countered that it was essentially an offer rather than a mandate. In view of the low birth rate and the costs resulting from demographic change, it was incumbent on family policy, she said, to provide encouragement to men who were committed to caring for their children. Conservatives also criticized the Child Care Funding Act, which committed the federal government, the lender and local authorities to create daycare capacity for 35% of the children under 3 years of age by the year 2013. When the Bishop of Augsburg, Walter Mixer, accused von der Leyen of having a fixation on dual-income married couples and reducing women to the level of birthing machines, leading CDU politicians such as Chancellor Merkel and Bundestag President Norbert Lammert leapt to her defense. The reactions that her initiatives garnered, whether approving or disapproving, ultimately showed that von der Leyen had succeeded in focusing public discourse on the topic of family policy. Federal Minister for Labor and Social Affairs. Ursula von der Leyen stood for a seat in the Bundestag for the first time in the election of the 27th of September 2009 and won a mandate via the state party list of the CDU of Lower Saxony. On the 28th of October 2009, after the coalition between the CDU/CSU and FDP had been formed, she was once again sworn in as Minister for Family Affairs, Senior Citizens, Women, and Youth. Her second term as Minister for Family Affairs lasted only for a brief time. After Franz Joseph Jung stepped down as Minister for Labour and Social Affairs, the cabinet was reshuffled. Von der Leyen took over one of the key portfolios of the government on the 30th of November 2009, when she became head of the Ministry of Labour. As Minister for Labour, she continued to promote the interests of families and working women. She oversaw the introduction of an education package in the Hartz IV reforms of the 25th of February 2011 and called for a women's quota on the executive boards of DAX-listed companies. Other key themes of her term included fighting poverty among the elderly and implementing the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. With regard to the wage dumping seen in various sectors of the economy, she called for a market-based minimum wage to be negotiated between unions and employers. On the 15th of November 2010, at the 23rd Party Conference of the CDU in Karlsruhe, she was elected Deputy Party Chairwoman. First woman as Minister of Defense. In the Bundestag election of the 22nd of September 2013, Ursula von der Leyen again gained her seat via the state party list of the CDU of Lower Saxony. The CDU and CSU received 41.5% of the vote and therefore constituted the largest parliamentary group. Following 3 months of coalition talks, the decision was made to form a grand coalition of CDU/CSU and SPD. When the new government was formed, von der Leyen found herself faced with a new challenge. On the 17th of December 2013, she was appointed Minister of Defense, succeeding Thomas de Maizière in that role. She was the first woman to hold the office and was therefore watched with an especially critical eye. After her swearing-in, she declared that she was willing to learn and had a terrific respect for her new duties. The fact that she was a woman and had no military experience was frequently commented upon during her first months in office, but, over time, the German public became accustomed to the idea of a woman as the top-ranking supervisor of the Bundeswehr. The suspension of compulsory military service as of the 1st of January 2011 and the consequent restructuring of the Bundeswehr as a fully professional army had made the recruitment of suitable personnel an urgent problem for the armed forces. Shortly after being sworn in, therefore, von der Leyen announced her intention to make the Bundeswehr one of the most attractive employers in Germany. In this endeavor, she was able to make use of the experience she had gained as Minister for Family Affairs. She expanded childcare options, for example, and built on opportunities for part-time service. In May 2014, she opened the Armed Forces First Day Nursery on the campus of the Bundeswehr University in Munich. Shortly after taking up her duties, she introduced another notable theme of her term. Speaking at the Munich Security Conference in January 2014, she advocated a stronger role for Germany in foreign and security policy. Indifference is not an option for a country like Germany, not from the standpoint of security policy and not from a humanitarian point of view. One key issue occupied her throughout her term of office: the modernization of the armed forces procurement system. In the summer of 2014, she hired a former McKinsey director, Katrin Suder, to reorganize the armament and procurement systems of the Ministry of Defense and appointed her as a state secretary with permanent civil servant status. This move was without precedent in the history of the Defense Ministry. In January 2016, von der Leyen announced a turnaround. For the first time since 1990, the Defense Ministry was again hiring additional personnel instead of cutting costs. For the period 2014 to 2018, the Bundestag approved armament projects worth approximately €32 billion, a significant increase over the €6 billion of the previous legislative period. The greater relevance of defense policy reflected in these numbers was not solely due to von der Leyen's efforts as Minister of Defense, however. It was rather a consequence of new threats arising from Islamist terrorism, the collapse of states in the Middle East, aggressive Russian policy and the refugee crisis. The new White Paper on Security Policy and the Future of the Bundeswehr, which Minister von der Leyen presented to the public on the 13th of July 2013, was likewise a response to these changes in the global security situation. It declared a willingness to assume responsibility, to play a leading role globally. One of the biggest challenges that von der Leyen faced during her first term of office at the Defense Ministry was the case of a lieutenant colonel who was arrested in April 2017 because he had assumed an alternative identity as a Syrian refugee and was suspected of planning a terrorist offense. After memorabilia of the Wehrmacht, the wartime German army, was found in the man's barracks, von der Leyen ordered a search of all army barracks. On television, she remarked that the Bundeswehr had an attitude problem and that it suffered from a misunderstood esprit de corps and weak leadership at various levels. She was strongly criticized for these admonitions, above all because, having already served for 3 years in the office of Defense Minister, she too was held responsible for the problems that she was lamenting. One of the biggest challenges that von der Leyen faced during her first term of office at the Defense Ministry was the case of a lieutenant colonel who was. In response to the scandal, von der Leyen initiated a revision of the Traditions Erlass of the Bundeswehr, a regulation that defines the traditions relevant to the German armed forces and, by extension, their governing values and norms. The revised regulation, which replaced a version that had been in effect since 1982, was signed by her in March 2018. The new regulation specifies that, in the search for traditions to serve as a source of orientation, soldiers should look primarily to the more than 60-year history of the Bundeswehr. Second term as Minister of Defense. In the Bundestag election in September 2017, von der Leyen stood as the lead candidate of the CDU in Lower Saxony and again entered parliament via the state party list. Once the difficult phase of forming a government had drawn to a close and another grand coalition was in place, von der Leyen was sworn in for the second time as Minister of Defense on the 14th of March 2018. That she was again chosen for this post was interpreted as a sign of the Chancellor's confidence in her. As the Tagesspiegel wrote on the 10th of March 2018, she was the only one considered tough enough to lead that difficult ministry. The fact that von der Leyen was the only minister who had been a cabinet member throughout Merkel's tenure as Chancellor was further evidence of her unique status. The office of Defense Minister certainly demanded much more from von der Leyen than any of her previous political duties and responsibilities had done. In the first few months of her second term as the authority with the power of command over the armed forces, she was again occupied with a steady flow of complaints about equipment shortages and procurement procedures. As always in her career, she met these challenges with characteristic steadfastness and perseverance. Commitment to Europe. After the European Parliament election of 26 May 2019, von der Leyen was nominated for the office of President of the European Commission by the European Council, composed of the heads of state and government of EU member states. On the 16th of July 2019, addressing the members of the European Parliament, she presented the political principles that she intended to put into practice in the event of her election. In her speech, she invoked Simone Veil, the first president of the European Parliament following the introduction of direct elections in 1979. The most important objective for Europe, she said, should be to become the world's first climate-neutral continent by the year 2050. She also announced an investment plan for a sustainable Europe. With regard to social affairs, she called for a European child guarantee to combat childhood poverty in the European Union and announced that she would present a draft for a new asylum and migration pact. One of her projects included convening a 2-year conference on the future of Europe beginning in 2020, in which citizens would play an active and indeed a leading role. This conference was intended to strengthen European citizens' attachment to Europe and European democracy. Although her nomination was initially controversial, von der Leyen was ultimately elected President of the European Commission with 383 of the 747 votes cast. She entered office on the 1st of December 2019. Soon afterwards, on the 11th of December, she appeared before the European Parliament to announce the strategy for a European Green Deal. This set of proposals centers on the goal of making Europe the first climate-neutral continent by 2050, that is, one with no net emission of greenhouse gases. The proposed measures seek to reconcile economic growth with climate protection, rather than treating them as mutually incompatible. With the European Green Deal, the EU is taking a leading international position in the field of climate protection. In the first year of her term at the head of the EU Commission, von der Leyen had to deal with Brexit, the withdrawal of Great Britain from the EU in accordance with the result of a referendum held in 2016. The United Kingdom was due to leave the European Union on the 31st of January 2020, when the withdrawal agreement came into force. The Trade and Cooperation Agreement governing its future relationship with the EU was finally agreed at the last moment, on the 24th of December 2020. Von der Leyen's term of office so far as President of the European Commission has been marked by extraordinary challenges and crises. The first was the coronavirus pandemic, the global outbreak of a new infectious disease, COVID-19. With far-reaching consequences for the health, livelihoods and coexistence of Europe's citizens, required a decisive response from the EU's member states. In April 2020, they agreed an aid package of more than €500 billion for employees, companies and countries that were being affected especially badly by the pandemic. In June 2020, von der Leyen announced an EU vaccination strategy with the aim of ensuring that within a period of 12 to 18 months, efficacious and affordable vaccines would be made available to all EU citizens. Described as the largest economic stimulus package ever financed in Europe, a recovery plan to cushion the long-term damage caused by COVID to society and the economy was drawn up. In December 2020, it was approved by the heads of state and government of all EU countries, the European Parliament and the European Commission. A total of €2,018 trillion were made available from the long-term EU budget and via the Next Generation EU temporary programme for recovery. The project was criticised, however, because in order to finance it, the EU took on joint debt for the first time. In response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine on the 24th of February 2022, von der Leyen took a clear stance, stating that the stability of Europe and the entire international order, our peace order, was at stake. In close coordination with the United States government, the EU introduced an extensive package of sanctions with the aim of limiting Russia's freedom of action. Since then, 11 such packages have come into force, the latest of them on the 23rd of July 2023. Von der Leyen spoke early and clearly in favor of opening the door to EU accession for Ukraine. During a visit to Kiev in April 2022, she reiterated her support for the country. "My message today is clear: Ukraine belongs in the European family." On the 23rd of June 2022, Ukraine, along with the Republic of Moldova and Georgia, was officially granted candidate status by the European Council. In May 2023, von der Leyen traveled to Ukraine for the fifth time since the beginning of the war, and on the 9th of May, Europe Day, she assured President Zelensky of the EU's unrestricted support for Ukraine in its defensive fight against Russia. A further challenge facing the EU during von der Leyen's term in office is the persistently high level of illegal migration. In response, she presented a 10-point plan to support Italy in September 2023, during a visit to the Italian island of Lampedusa in the Mediterranean Sea. She announced stronger action against people smugglers, coupled with the need to ensure that legal routes and humanitarian corridors offer migrants real alternatives. This would be the only way to break the vicious circle and refute the smugglers' narrative. The better we manage legal migration, the more strictly we can take action against irregular migration, said von der Leyen in a press statement. Ultimately, however, it is up to the member states to decide to implement a common policy. The Commission can only carry out the preparatory work for it. Most recently, on the 4th of October 2023, an agreement was reached on the final component of a common European asylum and migration policy. At a meeting of the Council's Committee of Permanent Representatives, the EU member states finalized their negotiating mandate for regulating crisis situations, such as the instrumentalization by others of migration, and force majeure in the areas of migration and asylum. This provides the basis for the coming negotiations between the Council Presidency and the European Parliament. On the 13th of September 2023, von der Leyen gave her annual State of the Union address to the EU Parliament in Strasbourg, her last such speech before the European elections in spring 2024. It is not yet known whether she will seek another term in office.